In this video, we'll attempt to use the primary legal concepts and terms concerning accountants' liability as a basis for studying legal liability of auditors. Some basic legal concepts involved in determining liability. First off is the prudent person concept. There is an agreement within the profession and the courts that the auditor is not a guarantor or insurer of financial statements. The auditor is expected only to conduct the audit with due care and is not expected to be perfect. The standard of the due care is often called the prudent person concept, which essentially is just reiterating that you're just trying to do your best job applicable within the accounting profession. We also have the liability for the acts of others. Generally, the partners or shareholders in the case of a professional corporation are jointly liable for the civil actions against any owner. It is different, however, if the firm operates as a legal liability partnership, which is also termed as an LLP, a limited liability company, which is an LLC, a general corporation, or a professional corporation with limited liability. Under these business structures, the liability for one's owner's actions does not extend to another's personal assets, unless the other owner was directly involved in the actions of an owner causing this type of liability. Of course, the firm's assets are all subject to the damages that arise. We also have a lack of privileged communication. Under common law, CPAs do not have the right to withhold information from the courts on the grounds that information is privileged. Confidential discussions between the client and auditor cannot be withheld from the courts. Why? Because it is good evidence. The person may be fraudulent in nature, so there is an accountant-client relationship that still withholds that they need to share information. Unlike maybe that of a psychiatrist or other professional counselor. Legal terms affecting CPA's liability. Before proceeding in the discussion of legal liability, we often examine several common terms that affect CPA's liability. Now, when the auditor has failed to conduct an adequate audit, liability may depend on the level of negligence, which can range from ordinary negligence to fraud. Also note that the distinction between joint and several liability and separate and proportional liability, because the amounts assessed will likely vary greatly between the two approaches when courts assess damages. We also have the sources of legal liability. Now, there's different sources of legal liability. We have the liability to clients, liability to third parties, civil liability, as well as criminal liability. The most common source of lawsuits against CPAs is from clients. The suits vary widely, including such claims as failure to complete an audit engagement on the agreed upon date, inappropriate withdrawal from the audit, failure to discover an embezzlement, and typically the amount of lawsuits is relatively small and they do not receive the publicity often given to suit involving third parties.